Ryan Nobles from CNN, good morning.
Hey, guys, good morning. How are you? You know, part of Congresswoman Tenney's game plan there last night, there are traditionally about 3 or 4 Democratic members of Congress who, get into the chamber early to get those seats right along the aisle to get the grip and grin with the president. And there were a couple of them that said they didn't want their picture with the president and actually just copped out of that altogether. So I think there's more space along that route than there was at previous State of the Unions.
I got to tell you, the whole getting out of the blocks. I mean, if you ever ran track, you got to be able to. Yeah. I used to run the 100-yard dash, and I would always win up to about 20 yards. I was quick out of the blocks. After that, my legs were just way too short. They just killed me. Yeah. I usually
there is something to be said,
veered off to the right
about. The Congresswoman is taking, she's taking a calculated risk here about that district, which, as you guys already know, is going to be one of the most competitive districts in the country. And she's not afraid to align herself with the president and the president's policies. She thinks that they've made the country better. Obviously, her opponents in this race feel differently. So you have to imagine, there's going to be a clear line drawn in that congressional race, and the president is going to be right standing at the top of that line, and voters are going to have a decision to make there.
I do have to tell you, Ryan, when I make my way out and about and dealing with people, the majority of people that I talk to are fans of President Trump in this market, and certainly we hear from people who aren't. We hear from people who are, but the majority of people we hear from, obviously, it's on WIBX. It's a Fox News affiliate. So you might expect talk radio is going to slant a little more to the Republican side. But I'm just talking about friends and going out to dinner. We do live this area is moderate, but I think it leans Trump, at least here, certainly in Herkimer County. Oneida County is probably a little more balanced. And again, I'm not giving any science here.
And you also have to look at the way that district is cut specifically. There are very few districts in America now that have a kind of a balance between Republicans and Democrats. So many of them have been gerrymandered.
Yep.
And that's one of the few districts that's remained a competitive district with maybe a slight Republican edge. So, Bill, we talked about this before. Generally, people's impression of the president is strong one way or the other, and I don't think that's different with that congressional district at all.
Yeah, and I think the numbers, you're absolutely right. The numbers, if you really look at the numbers in the district, it's a slight advantage to Republicans. And if the president ends up being unpopular by August, September, October, November, that probably won't help Claudia Tenney.
But I also think, Bill, and I think this is for Democrats as well. I do think that the president's personality, probably more than previous presidents, weighs heavily into this equation. But I also think that at the end of the day, the thing that people really care about is how the policies of that president or their interpretation of the policies that the president has put forward impacts them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And I think that you're going to see Republican members of the House are going to go out and tell voters, but hey, look at your paycheck. Are you getting less withdrawn out of your paycheck to pay taxes? Have you gotten a bit of a raise because of this Republican tax plan, and how is it helping your life? And Democrats are going to go and say, what are your health care costs? The Republicans have still yet to deal with this health care issue, and premiums are skyrocketing. It's just costing more to take care of your family. And I think in each individual household, people are going to say, yeah, geez, which one of these parties is really looking out for me? And I think both parties are going to have an argument to be made, and that might be the difference as to who holds control of the House when the dust settles in November.
Luke Perry from Utica College said he put out a tweet the other day about the vote. There aren't 60 votes to pass the new abortion bill. Could be an effort to get Senate Democrats running for re-election or for election from Trump states on record for or against. If the legislative filibuster is eliminated, though, momentum growing with the GOP, it would be a close vote. My take on that is if you're an ideological voter and the issue for you is abortion, you're probably the Democrats are never going to get your vote anyway. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think in some states you have some members of the Senate who are a little bit more moderate when it comes to topics like that. You know, you think of Joe Manchin in West Virginia, and you have some senators who have an identity of their own that isn't necessarily wrapped up in their party label.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, there to a certain extent, you can't avoid that at all. But I think some of these Democrats are able to kind of stand on their own 2 feet, and these issues don't get wrapped up in it. But I think that, you know, Dr. Perry's right in the idea that I think both Republicans and Democrats are going to do everything they can to try and force tough votes on some of these big issues as a way that you can go beat somebody over the head with it in a campaign ad. And maybe that doesn't necessarily tell the whole picture of somebody that's running, but it's definitely part of what the calculus that is being made by these members or by these voters as they go into it. And you're right. If you're somebody that abortion is your number one, the number one thing that you vote on, then you are going to that vote's going to have an impact on you. And there's going to be places like Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota is an example of that. That's a predominantly pro-life state. She voted against this ban. And the other thing, too, about this particular vote was this wasn't banning abortion outright. This was banning abortion at 20 weeks, which, and, you know, I know that there's going to be pro-life and pro-choice people who come after me on this. Most Americans agree that a baby shouldn't be aborted at that stage of development. So this isn't that controversial. Abortion gets wrapped into this big thing. And so I do think that there are, you know, that's one of those type of issues that you can really beat somebody over the head with in a campaign ad, and it does drive out enthusiasm and emotion.
Well, and let's be honest, the gun issue is very similar. Republicans, conservatives don't want to give up anything on guns because they feel that you take an inch, you take a mile. Same thing on abortion. So it ultimately puts you in a position where you're actually are not trying to prevent a late-term abortion, which the rest of the country looks at as being something that's horrible.
Bill, you could say that about every issue in Washington.
You're right, especially right now.
It's gotten so divisive. I think immigration is the best example of that, right?
Yeah.
I could give you 10 tenets of immigration that most Americans agree on. Most Americans believe we should have stronger border security. Most Americans believe there should be some protection for dreamers. Most Americans think that there should be an easier path to citizenship and that it should be tougher to get into the country illegally. But Republicans and Democrats, motivated by the hard right and hard left groups, cannot budge at all on either of those topics, so compromise is impossible. So you're right, Bill. If you're somebody that really cares about the dreamers, wouldn't you say, I'm willing to give a little bit on tougher border security because I want to protect the people that are already in this country and, other than the way they came into this country, have lived here legally? And on the other side of it, if you really care about border security, do you really think that you're going to advocate for deporting 800,000 people who've only known this country as their homeland?
Yeah.
But neither side can seem to come to that consensus, and that's part of the reason that we find ourselves in this.
Wasn't it an Arkansas congressman yesterday was calling for the arrest of any dreamers that showed up with Democrats last night?
Arizona
yeah.
congressman. Yeah. And that, and that Arizona, of course, the, ground zero in the immigration debate, and Jeff Flake, the senator from there, is somebody that's kind of leading the charge to come up with a bill that can protect dreamers, but that from the same state, another member of Congress is saying, I want to ID every single person that comes into the Capitol to make sure that they're not an illegal immigrant so that they can't come into, as if somebody like that, I don't know, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, do they, it's just a nonsensical point of view, but it plays in to the heated emotion and rhetoric of this issue.
And listen, if you're a fair and you look at the president in a fair way, even for those who really, really support the president, we can all agree that oftentimes when the president gives a speech like this, we have found that he gives a great speech. He was on prompter. This is the teleprompter version of the president. It's when he begins to tweet out the next day or make and then answer questions about those tweets where he ends up getting in the mud. So far, the president has not tweeted since he asked people to join him live on Twitter to watch the speech last night. He's pretty silent on Twitter right now. That could be a good thing?
Yeah, it's only a matter of time, though, Bill.
Okay.
I mean, I just think that
it is true.
we've been talking about the presidential pivot for since he started his campaign for president, and I really think the State of the Union has become kind of an almost immaterial exercise in Washington. It's something that those of us that live inside the Beltway care about. I highly recommend an article that was written by my very good friend Peter Hamby, who used to work for CNN, is now the head of news at Snapchat. He wrote it for Vanity Fair last week, and it's all about the pomp and circumstance of the State of the Union and how at the end of the day it doesn't really move the needle at all.
Right.
It's a made-for-TV spectacle. Fewer and fewer Americans are even tuning into it on a regular basis.
It's the Pro Bowl. It's the Pro Bowl is what this is.
Right, exactly. It's a great way to describe it. And, and it's not just Donald Trump. You look back in history, there are very few presidents who laid out this kind of rigid agenda at a State of the Union and then followed through on that agenda. Maybe one or two of the points that they make end up actually becoming reality.
Yeah,
it's just theater. It doesn't really matter all that much. And even with Donald Trump, you're right. He gave a good speech. He's good at this. I mean, he wouldn't be president of the United States if he wasn't good at it. It doesn't really matter a whole heck of a lot. And the idea that he's all of a sudden going to put down his phone and stop tweeting is not going to happen. He's going to do it soon. He's going to fire people up. That's part of who he is. And honestly, that's part of why he has the rock-solid support he does with a certain sector of the American people.
And to be fair for Democrats, when President Obama was giving his State of the Union, Republicans sat on their hands. They had the same criticism. At one point, there was a Republican that yelled out at the president. You recall that? So this is just what it is. You can't. It's a spectacle. It's theater. Unfortunately,
I saw some people suggesting that maybe they should go back to the way it was during Thomas Jefferson's era, where the president just wrote a very long, detailed note about his upcoming agenda and hurried it over to the Capitol, and that was his State of the Union. Yeah. It probably would have the same impact that the State of the Union does right now.
We are in it's very interesting. We talked to a Russian political guy who's almost been killed twice, assassinated twice by Putin's administration, who spoke last night at Hamilton College. And he talked just about there's an element that he fears that one of the things that Putin wants to accomplish is that to create doubt in our way of life. In particular, the first thing Putin did when he took control of Russia was he took control of the media. Everything is now state-run in Russia. There's no independent media, no sources whatsoever that are independent. But one of the things that he's been able to accomplish through Facebook and through all of this stuff where, they're influencing our elections. One of the things he's accomplished is creating this doubt that no one tells the truth. The media is lying. They have an agenda. The politicians are lying. They have an agenda. It gets to the point where regular people, who have no one to trust anymore because we've lost faith. If Putin's accomplished anything, he's accomplished that. What are your thoughts?
100%, Bill. I mean, we talk all the time about the eroding trust in our institutions, and the lack of trust in the media is a big part of it. Now, I've said before, and I will always say this, as members of the media, we can't just blame all this on Putin. To a certain extent, we've got to figure out how we've allowed that trust to erode. But yes, and I think the other problem that is happening is that politicians, in their own self-interest, are taking advantage of people's lack of trust. So it is a heck of a lot easier to sow seeds of doubt with the average American than it is to help instill their confidence and trust in something. And so we've seen Republicans, both Republican and Democrat, who take advantage of the fact that people don't trust the other side and use that to their advantage. There was a time where, Republicans and Democrats, I think it was former New York Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan who said, you're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
Right.
Facts don't seem to exist anymore. And that is a real problem for the average American. And, to a certain extent, it is incumbent upon the reader and the viewer to seek out outlets that you can trust. But, it is so easy to sow doubt right now in this day and age. And, I think that Putin is responsible for that. But I think there's an even grander and wider, the conspiracy is not the right word, but effort to try and do this because it to a certain extent, it helps people. It gives them an opportunity to take advantage of it, and that is a dangerous thing for our democracy.
Well, the president is guilty of it himself. He's certainly tweeted out enough and talked enough, and even in press conferences. So it is something where I hope it's a phase that we get through it. But it is so. You're right. It's just so important to find not just a network or a news source, but even a reporter or someone, people that you trust, that you feel are fair. I think it is the responsibility of us as Americans to do that.
I hope you can trust me, Bill.
No, Ryan, not at all. I'm a Don Lemon guy. That's me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ryan, we definitely trust you. That's why we enjoy having you on. So, all right, man. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Before I go, can I just say, I want to send out my condolences to the family of Mike Finelli, a good friend of mine from Utica, worked for the Utica DPW for more than 40 years, who lost his life this week. A good friend of many. I know our friend Mike Lynch is very close with the Finelli family. A lot of people that I'm close with in the Finelli family, and I've enjoyed a beer or two on the back deck of Lynch's house with Mike Finelli. Just a great human being, somebody that gave his career and so much of his life to the city of Utica. And, I'm thinking about the Finelli family, and I hope everybody in Utica is as well.
That's very nice. Tim Julian really said the same thing yesterday. Definitely a big loss for the city of Utica.
Yeah.
Ryan, we appreciate it. Thanks so much. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a great one. Bye.